All right, you guys, when you get to part 9 of your typical sixth grader project, that is explain any gaps, clusters, or cluster peaks or symmetry. So what that means is what you want to do is look at your box plot or your dot plot or your line plot. I said box plot, sorry. Look at your dot plot. Now, a gap, let's start with the first word, a gap. A gap means there is a space or where no data was. So I definitely have a gap between 5 and 10 or between 6 and 9. I have no data. And then I might say I have another small gap between 12 and 15. But that would be considered a gap. So I would definitely mention that in this explanation. A cluster, that means that's an area where a lot of data came together or clustered. So I definitely have a cluster of data between 1 and 5. So I will say that there is a cluster of data between 1 and 5 haircuts per year. Okay? A peak, that's exactly what it sounds like. Where does your data peak? I have one peak. Your mode is your peak. So when I mention my cluster, I will also say the peak of my data is within that cluster and it's over the two haircuts per year. Symmetry. Symmetry means like if I drew a line down the center of my line plot, does the data look symmetrical on both sides? Mine does not really show symmetry because if I split the line plot down the middle, this side does not look like this side. So there is no symmetry in my dot plot. But if you see, like sometimes graphs might have a nice, and I'm just drawing this quickly, but you might have a line plot and we might have some dots going up like here, and then it gets kind of smaller, and then you might have 1 or 2 and 1 or 2 and 1. So if this was your dot plot, and sorry, that's so small, if I drew a line down the middle, see how this side, maybe I'll add a couple more. See how this side kind of matches or mirrors the data on that side. Then I would say that you could say that your data is symmetrical around whatever. Let's say this was a 7 there. You could say my data seems to be symmetrical on both sides of the 7. Okay. So when I write mine, okay, I'm going to say when I examined my dot plot, I noticed a gap between 6 and 9 haircuts and a small gap between 13 and 14. Okay? A lot of my data is clustered around 1 to 5, which means most students get 1 to 5 haircuts per year. The peak is in that cluster at 2 haircuts per year. And I'm just going to put in parentheses, mode. Okay. Oh gosh, I'm so zoomed in. You can't see what I'm writing. Oh well, there we go. When I examined my dot plot, I noticed a gap between 6 and 9 haircuts and a small gap between 13 and 14. A lot of my data is clustered around 1 to 5, so 1 to 5, which means most students get 1 to 5 haircuts per year. The peak is in the cluster at 2 haircuts per year, mode. So symmetry, I will just say my data is not showing symmetry. Okay, and then that would be a good enough answer. So let me know if you have questions about gaps, clusters, peaks, or symmetry. And it's possible you can have more than one cluster. You could have a lot of data clustered over here, and then you might have another clustering of data there. This, I don't think it's, excuse me, somebody could have said there is a smaller cluster between 10 and 15, but I chose not to. Maybe if I had one or two more pieces of data over here, then I would consider this a cluster, but this is where the bulk of my data landed, so I definitely considered that a cluster. All right, I hope that helps you with part 9 of your project.